be a little more clear and professional. What
All
have you
right. Let's say like you go ahead first because you set up the debate. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's the plan. But I'll go ahead and give it a few more minutes. All right, I think I'm just gonna go ahead and get started with my remarks. I'm sure if people are interested in watching it later, I have it recorded. So also if you need to dip out, that's fine. It's mostly just because I feel the need to defend the honor of the party this guy said we're cowards. And so here we are. We're gonna see if Kaito the wolf is right. So I'm gonna get started. First of all, I would like to thank Kaito for making his appearance. It should be an interesting one. Today, we ask the question, what is the correct line for American communism to pursue in the modern condition? I've intentionally decided to frame this debate in this way so as to prevent the debate from being vulgarized into, unconstructive bickering and not really having a core thing that we're arguing around. While my opponent and I will certainly debate our respective points, I hope that he will offer, as I will, a positive vision to answer today's question. And from there, we can compare and debate our views. So, without further ado, I'll begin to make my case. I hold that the American Communist Party, constituted last summer as the true successor of the Communist Party USA and the historical communist movement in this country, is the only party of standing, compared namely with the dominant quote unquote left organizations, the DSA and the PSL, that has the correct theoretical synthesis, outlook, and leadership and ethos among the cadre to reconstruct a militant working class movement in this country. I agree with the basic summary of the task at hand for this country and communism as laid out in our party constitution. Quote, the task of building a communist party in the American context, like the task of building an American state, depends upon the unification of disparate elements. What we mean here, challenging the point of view of many leftist organizations and commentators, is that the left in America is virtually non existent. Now you'll see Hassan and these other individuals who are kind of figureheads of the quote unquote left in this country appearing with AOC and Bernie. And it becomes clear that the so called left, right? Hassan calls himself a communist. They're in league with the Democrat Party. So, in our view, for us, saying that there is a left in this country is really begging the question. If you're going to say the Democrats are left wing, then that's an entirely different question. But in any case, building a new American left is a task which intrinsically calls for the unification of disparate elements in American civil society. We don't have a foundation. We don't really have a constituted authority of the left wing in this country. So, building up a new left in this country is going to be bringing together disparate elements. The reason that the American Communist Party is uniquely positioned for this task, as outlined, I will now summarize. One, the American Communist Party has already demonstrated, in accordance with Mao's sense of the mass line, an exceptional energy and determination in its work within the real working class communities. As I mentioned in the quotations of Mao, or as it is mentioned in the quotations of Mao, quote, to link oneself with the masses, one must act in accordance with the needs and wishes of the masses. All work done for the masses must start from their needs and not from the desire of any individual, however well intentioned, unquote. A simple search for the ACP main account on X will reveal that the party within its various chapters, newly constituted and small as it is now, has begun with enthusiasm the work of linking themselves to the masses. To name a few examples from the last few weeks, the party, especially the New York chapter, has led organization efforts at the Port of New York, New Jersey, to organize drayage truckers, while ACP California has led union organization efforts at the ports of Long Beach over in the West Coast. These efforts have a strategic aim of building militant working class power at the economic choke points of the regime. Of course, the ports, the supply chains, building militant labor power there at these key kind of choke points is decisive. And we are moving in that direction with a strategic, militant approach in mind. This, in addition to the countless community service and outreach initiatives taken by our party to build local credibility and support, such as ACP New Mexico's volunteer work for a community garden at a school, or ACP Oregon's service at a local kitchen for the homeless and needy. All of this within the last few weeks, not to mention the hundreds of other efforts carried out by party members across this country every day. The highlights of this, which you can see clearly once again on the ACP main page. It is a simple fact that other organizations which call themselves socialist and communist have existed for far longer, rake in large amounts of money from exacting dues on their members, and yet have little to no accomplishments to boast about. These other organizations, it is clear, not only lack the energy of the ACP, but rather than embracing the mass line, are objectively antagonistic to the masses. Rather than build collective power and solidarity among workers, they largely have opted for a form of liberal vanity politics, genuflecting insincerely to an idea of the workers they have in their head, while building organizations that are far more concerned with self referential protests, empty slogans, and virtue signaling towards a kind of academic, petty bourgeois radicalism of subjective recognition, sexual licentiousness, and anarchistic countercultural performances. None of these serve to go down to the masses. Rather, it is taken for granted by these organizations that the actual content of the masses, that is, working class Americans, are largely reactionary, and that only awakened white progressives, minorities who are exalted into a fake image of themselves, and fringe sexual and gender identities are actually quote unquote revolutionary. Two, the American Communist Party is committed to an authentic expression of Marxism Leninism. Constantly, the party is accused of revising, co opting, deviating, or otherwise straying from the theoretical body of communist practice accrued from Marx and Engels in the Paris Commune, to the Bolshevik and Chinese revolutions, to the decolonial Marxist struggles, and beyond. To this date, and I would be happy here if Kaito would break the trend, it is yet to be concretely demonstrated outside of a host of spurious allegations, quibbling with the personal comments of various party members, and hollow buzzwords that the ACP is either not communist or that it is secretly something else, fascist, right wing, or otherwise. The first question in appraising whether or not an organization is Marxist Leninist is whether or not it accepts Lenin's formulation of the vanguard party, which observes the principles of democratic centralism. One need only look as far as the publicly available constitution of the party, acp.us/constitution, which outlines in its fifth article a principled structure of democratic centralism centered around an executive board and politburo, which is democratically overseen by nationwide delegates from the party central committee. Formally speaking, then, the ACP fulfills the structural requirements to be acknowledged as a Marxist Leninist party, but this is rarely pointed to. Instead, various quibbles with the personalities and presentation of the party as it appears online appear to be dominant. Beyond this, all of the positions of the party are available to view at acp.us/program. I'll be interested to hear what specific arguments Kaito has against the program. What is more likely, however, is that Kaito will set out to complain about the personalities and comments of individual members rather than to praise the party itself as a collective organization. 3. The American Communist Party has the most advanced approach and tactics for a revolutionary movement in the age of the internet. It is not a mark against the party, but rather a credence to its own potential that many of its founding members have successfully built very strong online presences. We need only point to Jack, who has 250,000 followers on X, and Hazeldin himself, the chairman, who has over 100,000 followers. We do not set out to argue that followers on X are a perfect measuring stick of success, but we also claim that the party and its surrounding supporters online, called the guerrillas or the infrared sphere, have revolutionized the tactics of agitprop and public discourse for the new internet age in a manner unlike any party before. And it is a key vehicle for the success and energy characteristic of the party. In terms of translating an online sphere into a concrete on the ground movement, the ACP is perhaps the first of its kind. The ACP and its supporters have not set out to merely be part of some discourse, to sit around gossiping, but rather we set out to control the discourse itself. It is in this way that the novel approach and model of the ACP and its founders have made massive wakes. Who can honestly say in the online political sphere that they have not heard of the MAGA communism slogan? Meanwhile, what agitprop has the DSA or the PSL put out that anyone can seriously recall? No. Rather, for the rest of the so called left, there is only an endless, incestuous discourse, sometimes over streamers, sometimes over the news, sometimes over controversial questions, that is bottomless inside its echo chamber and has no ultimate referent. The discourse for the rest of the left is circular and an entirely simulated cacophony that is not conscious of its effort, nor does it have a strategy behind it. This is why all of the major debates and confrontations between reactionaries and the communist position have been centered around the ACP, because it is the only party which has made itself an authentic authority on the science of Marxism Leninism in the context of the United States. For example, the recent debate between the schizo posting JQ or truth teller against Haas is clear. It is the ACP that has restored authority to the discourse, and it is now obvious that the rest of the so-called left swirls around and references the party. It is the ACP, and it is all of the ankle biters and wreckers swirling around it. We have restored authority. Taken together, ultimately, the American Communist Party has the best line for communism in this country moving forward, because it is the only one that authentically observes mass politics and the mass line. It is the only one that is theoretically faithful to the historical experience of Marxism Leninism and seeks to attain to the example of this legacy. And it is the only party which has adapted a strategy and tactic suited to the internet age. So that is my opening.
Okay. I feel like I should open with a question.
Okay, sure.
What does American communism mean to you?
The application of Marxism Leninism in the United States and Canada.
In Canada, why are
Sure.
we including Canada?
Because in our view, the North American civilization is one block. We see no special or relevant difference between Canada and the United States. Um, I love the comrades from Canada. We have several chapters, Ontario. I believe we have British Columbia. Um, yeah,
Okay, so you mentioned the entire North American bloc and
sure.
saying the US and Canada. But you're also leaving out Mexico and all the other countries south of Mexico that are
Well,
considered part of
I
North
speak
America.
colloquially of North America. I would consider that Mexico has a different civilizational content than the United States, and I don't see realistically Mexico being subsumed into the efforts in the United States and Canada. Rather, I see them having their own effort, obviously with the spirit of internationalism in mind and solidarity, and working closely with these elements in Central America and South America. Um, for our party, we do see that our specific national context is the United States and Canada. Because, as Marx says, the revolution and the working class struggle is not national in substance, but is national in form. So we have kind of set that boundary as the question of American communism.
Okay, but do you think that taking over Canada or sort of like making Canada like a part of American communism, do you not see that as imperialism?
No, I don't see it as imperialism because the idea is not that the United States is going to invade Canada. That's not the idea. The idea is that the party is going to have efforts in both countries. The ACP is not, of course, the state power. It's not the regime. It is the working class, right? So we are bringing together the working class of these two countries.
I get bringing together the working class of the two countries, but as Hinkle said one time that and I'm referring to a tweet that Hinkle made where he said that Manifest Destiny is not complete until we liberate Canada. Manifest Destiny being an infamous imperial movement in America that essentially was the American Empire taking over what isn't
We know
like
what
all the way from the
manifest
East
destiny is,
Coast to
buddy.
the
All right.
West Coast.
It's that. So this is exactly what I said, right? So the invitation, right, is to debate the ACP. The ACP are cowards. And then what do you know? We've not heard any comment on the program, the constitution, the outlook of our organization. It's just these kind of complaints and quibbling with the rhetoric used by one personality in the party online. So can you do you think that the ACP like secretly is advocating for quote unquote manifest destiny on Canada because of a Jackson Hinkle tweet? Or do you think that this is just rhetoric? It's just viral. It's just I mean, it's a little bit of fun, right?
I think it's interesting because wouldn't you say that Jackson Hinkle is the face of the ACP, or would you attribute that to someone else?
I don't think there's any real face of the ACP as an organization. Of course, we do have members like we it's obvious that the party is founded by Haas and Jackson and the plenary committee. And those are personalities, of course. Like I mentioned, these are all men who have successfully been able to create a new space for Marxism
Sorry
Leninism
about that.
online and, of course, have built major followings. But when we're talking about the American Communist Party, we're not talking about any one person, right? We're talking about a Marxist Leninist party, which abides by democratic centralism. All of our members are bound to a collective body and a collective action, right? So, sure, there's personalities in the party, but to me, that's irrelevant to appraising the ACP as a party.
Okay, so so you guys don't agree with what Jackson said about that tweet.
I mean, it's not really like, was this an official statement sent out or was this a tweet? Right?
It was a tweet he made.
Yeah, it's a tweet. So is that kind of the level we're operating at? Like tweets are now kind of
No,
representative of the
this
position
isn't
of the
the level
party?
we're operating. Um, but also want to bring up religion. How do you intend to tackle religion with regards to American communism? Because America is a very Christian nation. A lot of people would in this country would call themselves Christians, right?
Right.
So how would you, the ACP, plan on tackling religion?
Well, as I mentioned in my opening, the principal task of building American communism in this country is bringing together disparate elements. The party is not sectarian in any religious regard. Many of our members, including me, have expressed a Christian sort of communism as an outlook. We also have Muslims as part of the party, atheists. The question of religion is not compared at least to the expressions of early 20th century and 19th century Marxism, which was a lot more militant in its atheism. The party is not so interested in pursuing only because we believe the conditions are very different. Because when you look at the 19th and early 20th centuries, for example, when you look at Russia, the Tsarist Empire controlled the church, right? The ruling class of Russia controlled the church, and this is not hyperbolic. Ever since 1721 under Peter the Great, right? The Russian church was controlled by a secular procurator who was the governor of the church, and he was a bureaucrat of the Tsarist regime, right? So when we're talking about the church as this institution, um, it makes sense then that the church, insofar as it is serving as an actor and as a force on behalf of the ruling class, it makes sense insofar as that is the case to oppose the church, right? Not on grounds of atheism necessarily, but on grounds of simple, realist calculation. If the church is going to offer material support to the ruling class, to the czarist regime, et cetera, then we have to, in some sense, oppose the church. Now, of course, in the Russian context, when the Bolshevik Revolution came to pass, the church was later given a space in Russia and given a place to exist, and it was not overly persecuted. But insofar as the church had made itself an ally of the bourgeoisie, of the czarist autocracy, it had to be opposed. We don't have that context, right? In the United States, we already have separation of church and state. So there's not really this dynamic where communism has to be this militant atheist force that is opposing a specific expression of state religion, because we do not have a state religion. So, in my view, the question of religion should be relegated to a matter of personal conviction. I'm not opposed to it being used to using your faith uh, to inform your positions. I'm not opposed to that, but I'm also um, not interested either in a sectarian religious communism or a sectarian militant atheist communism.
Okay, so I have something to say about that. Because Lenin says, on scientific socialism, i.e., Marxism, philosophical basis of Marxism, as Marx and Engels have repeatedly declared, is dialectical materialism, which has fully taken over the historical traditions of the 18th century materialism in France and of the Feuerbach, the first half of the 19th century in Germany. Materialism, which is absolutely atheistic and positively hostile to religion. Let us recall the whole of Engels' Anti-Dühring, which Marx read in the manuscript as an indictment of the materialist atheist Dühring for not being consistent materialist and for leaving loopholes for religion and religious philosophy. Let us recall in his essay on Ludwig Feuerbach, Engels reproached Feuerbach for combating religion, not in order to destroy it, but in order to renovate it, to invent a new exalted religion, so forth. Religion is the optimum of the people. This dictum by Marx is the cornerstone
Do
of the
you mean
whole
the
outlook
opium?
of religion.
Not the
Marxism
optimum of the
has
people,
always
buddy. It's
regarded
the opium.
all modern religions and churches and each and every religious organization as instruments of bourgeois reaction that serve to defend exploitation and to befuddle the working class.
Okay, okay, we get the point. We have all heard the chattering, right? This constantly repeated opium of the people thing. But then when you actually go to where that appears in the critique of the philosophy of right, what becomes clear is that for Marx and Engels, they of course were atheists and they of course were dialectical materialists, but they had much more of a problem with the critique of religion not passing into a critique of real reality, right? So you mentioned Feuerbach, right? So Feuerbach was a post-Hegelian
Yes.
kind of guy, who was pushing this kind of atheism, but it was kind of enchanted atheism. It was an idealist atheism. Um, and in the view of Marx and Engels, they basically what was happening was the real critique of real reality was not being able to happen under Feuerbach because he was attached to this kind of idealist humanism, right? And this is the same idealist humanism, for example, of the liberal revolutions, right? The cult of reason, the rights of man, right? The Declaration of Independence. All of these documents have this kind of humanism that is more idealistic, right? So what I want to emphasize is that the critique of religion is exactly what Marx and Engels were tired of. Like you can look at letters where Marx is like atheists are so worried about this boogeyman god that they're obsessing over the wrong thing basically. The call for communism is the call for dialectical materialism, which is a critique of reality, a concrete critique of reality using scientific means, um, and applying general laws of history, right? You can be religious and apply a dialectical materialist science. That's my view. And I know that contradicts what did you read this out of? Lenin? But
Yeah, this
frankly,
is Lena.
I feel at liberty to disagree with Lenin here, especially with what I laid before, which is that Lenin's context is a lot different. Why was the militant atheism so important in the Russian context is because the Russian Orthodox Church was literally an asset controlled by the Tsarist regime. It was controlled by the Holy Synod, which was governed by a Russian secular bureaucrat, right? So the church was completely in the hands of the Tsarist autocracy. So it makes sense that in the realistic context of the struggle in Russia, it was a matter of security for the party to be opposed to the church. But like I emphasized, after the revolution, the church was allowed to remain, right? And in the 1936 Stalin Constitution, religious liberty is guaranteed. So this is very specific to one time. Um, and I don't think it really is a matter of fierce contention in our day and age, right? Because in what we're really talking about is a question of philosophy right now, right? The question of philosophy is what what is the philosophical move after the end of philosophy, right? Hegel's the last philosopher. What do we do now, right? Do we create a new god out of man, or do we embrace a scientific outlook? And you can have a scientific outlook and be religious and be a communist. So I really don't see the problem. Um, and then kind of tying it all back, where is this? Where does the program of the ACP, the Constitution, nothing we've ever said says we are religious communists, right? Our official position is not a sectarian religious position. So there are many atheists in the party. So I think that's I think that's fine, right?
I felt this was necessary to bring up with reference to American communism simply because a lot of American culture is rooted in Christianity. So, also what you said about Lenin being wrong. So, if you're saying he was wrong on like religion and stuff, wouldn't
I'm not
that
saying he
kind of
was
be
wrong. I'm saying
revisionism?
if you read our constitution, you would know that we are not doctrinaire or sectarian dogmatists. We're not going to take every single thing ever written by Lenin and appraise it as if it was scriptural, right? That's not what we're doing. We are clearly a Marxist-Leninist party,
Oh,
which draws
I never said
heavily on communism, but we're not going to accept like, especially when I have already made this point twice now that it's a very conditional, realistic provision for a given time and a given setting. It's not something that is like this end all be all permanent fact that religion has to be dogmatically opposed, right? you can have commitments to a religious faith and also be a part of a communist party. And I see.
I wasn't saying you couldn't have any religious faith and be a part of a communist party, but I'm saying
Can we get back to the topic? Also, you're muted.
it is rooted in idealism because a lot of people religion is rooted in idealism where a lot of people seem to where a lot of people makeups or I don't know if I want to say make up, but a lot of people try to understand like a higher being and trying to understand this like sort of what's greater than us humans and attribute it to that rather than looking at it scientifically. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that religion is entirely a bad thing. I I would call myself a Christian myself, but I would also say that Marxism is sort of inherently hostile to religious idealism. So that's sort of what I had to say.
Um, I mean that's awesome. That's really good for you, Kaito the Wolf. Can we get back to the topic now? We're debating American
Yes.
communism. I think I gave a very reasonable explanation of the party's position on religion. Um, so do you have anything else for us? You're muted.
Um okay. I guess one thing I want to add in is what do you mean by MAGA communism? Do you mean supporting Trump and
No,
being communist or
no. So
what
two things
what
have to
is
be
that?
made clear at the outset. The first thing is that MAGA communism is a slogan that predates the ACP by 2 years. The slogan was created, and the Substack that gave some theoretical meat to the slogan came out in 2023, which is before the party came to exist. It's not an official line of the party, but I can answer the question: what is the view of MAGA communism? Um, which is the second thing is that it is not the support of Donald Trump, is not the support of the Republican Party. Rather, it is a provocative slogan that is meant to begin a debate over where the working class in America is actually located. And our view has been that the MAGA movement, right? Not Donald Trump, but the MAGA movement represents a significant portion of the American working class. And when we look at the terrain of leftist politics reacting to Trumpism, the MAGA movement, it has been almost unilaterally demonization. You have, I'm sure you know, Hassan likes to call these people hogs. They're called reactionary, fascists, baskets of deplorables. Here, the quote unquote leftists and the liberals really come together here in kind of chastising and demonizing MAGA. Um, but what we have seen in MAGA and what our view is that there is a general and genuine sort of revolutionary fervor that is emerging in the working class that is currently being displaced by this false consciousness of following Trump and Trumpism, right? The American working class votes for Donald Trump to send a torpedo into DC to drain the swamp. And of course, what does Trump do? He gets on his knees for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's doing this random kind of posturing of war with Iran. He cannot resolve the Ukraine crisis. He he's just a standard reactionary imperialist politician, right? But the energy of MAGA and the frustration that MAGA is communicating is something in accordance with the mass line, which I talked about in my opening, that should be articulated and should be validated, right? We should not be ostracizing or sectioning off MAGA as this inherently fascistic element of the working class when it is genuinely like the majority of the blue collar working class and the productive labor in this country is either like in MAGA or MAGA adjacent, right? You're not going to find any like genuine working class people in our view that are like big like woke people, like big Democrat supporters. If any of these like kind of in the middle people that might be left leaning that are in the working class, they're mostly independent, right? Maybe they like Bernie, but there's the Democrat Party is this kind of petty bourgeois like urban cosmopolitan party. It does not represent the working class in any way. And in our view, it's unfortunate that the MAGA movement has been able to give genuine frustration, genuine valid frustration at the regime. It has been able to uh, dilute it into a false consciousness and into support for the bourgeois party and bringing all of this energy back into the system.
I also want to mention this. Jackson Hinkle and Haas both flip flop on the whole Trump thing because they were very much in support of Trump before the election,
That's not true.
and they always flip flop because
That's just not
Hinkle
true.
edited
I
Trump
want to be 100%
and
clear
either
here. That is
photoshopping
not
himself in an
that is
AI
not
and
true. That is not true. Neither Jackson Hinkle nor Haz al-Din have ever said vote for Trump, have ever said support Republicans. Neither of them have done this, right? Once again, you're pointing towards a Jackson Hinkle joke tweet, and I don't even know what you're going off of to suggest that Haz has ever supported Trump. He's never supported Trump. It's never been the case that we support Trump. That's never been our position. Um, it's just a mischaracterization. And frankly, here's the frustrating thing, right? Is you can find publicly available. You don't even have to like dig through Kick or dig through the YouTube. There is a Substack literally called MAGA Communism that outlines the theory of MAGA communism. The positions of the parties are literally in acp.us/program. You can go and see them. Our constitution, how our party functions, is publicly available on our website. All of these things are available, but our critics, they don't care, right? They have never tried to honestly appraise our party, its positions, the theories that come out of people within and adjacent to the party. They've not tried to look at any of this, right? And all of the attempts of people who have like vaguely tried to refute actual concrete things that we've put out, they never go well, right? They're always bad faith. They're always misrepresenting. They're always using bad argumentation. So at this point, Kaido the Wolf, right? You have been on X.com since 2021, or I think that's what that, yeah. You have had years to look at infrared. You have had almost a year to look at ACP, and you're asking these ridiculous, like elementary questions, like the most like this is ABCs. And you've had years to look at this stuff and study it and make a position on it and actually bring forward a critique. So I have to ask you, when you say ACP are cowards, right? 100 people like this post. What actually do you have to say against our party that you have been commentating on and complaining about for almost a year. What is actually like what is your substantive position here? Like, have you read any of the things that I mentioned? Do you have grounds to say that the ACP are cowards when you are too cowardly to fucking read our shit? Like, go ahead.
Okay. My actual critique of the party is that I feel like you guys are a bunch of social conservatives. Like, you guys always dogmatically go on someone. Sorry. You always dogmatically defend someone who even, like, is calls themselves or even says they're socialist. Like, for example, a lot of you guys have been defending Pol Pot, who is notoriously CIA backed and did
Bro.
a lot of horrible
So
things in Cambodia.
all of your major points so far have been trolls and jokes on Twitter. Is that like where we're at right now? Like, do you think we're a secret Pol Potist party because some random guy named Gorilla Pol Pot 1917 Pol Pot did nothing wrong said on Twitter last week that Pol Pot was the greatest hero of all time? Like, is that where we're is this seriously the level you're gonna keep bringing us down to? Is tweets, like tweets, like from cows who like they got their way. You looked at their tweet and you started like shrieking like a fucking retard when it's literally like a tweet, bro. Like that's like we're not Pol Potists, all right? But as for the whole social conservative thing, I think it is the position of communists historically, and it ought to be the position to defend the
Why did you just
family.
say the R slur?
Oh, the retard? I say
Yeah,
retard
that
all the
word is a
time.
slur.
Yeah. Is that
Why'd
like
you use
okay?
it?
So you don't have any positions. So now you're gonna kind of like just kind of tone police me, complain I said the R word. Like, is that
Bro,
where we're at right
why
now? Like,
no,
like
hold on.
everyone can see that
Why would you
you
use
have
it?
brought me 3 tweets to complain about, and you asked me a bunch of random questions about religion, and now you're trying
Because
to
it's
like
important to
complain about
Marxism.
my
You guys
language.
no. I want to go back to the whole R slur thing. Why do you feel the need to be ableist when a lot of Marxists, when the whole line of communism is making work better for all workers, and that includes people with disabilities?
Is this like where we're at right now? So, do you think that you will go to like Detroit and you'll walk into the Ford factory and they don't say the R slur? They're not a little bit crude and vulgar in their language. Um like this is like this kind of precarity, like politics of like being very sensitive and politically correct, like this is just like bourgeois like idealism, right? That if only people stop saying slurs, ableism would end, right? If only people were nicer and smiled more and didn't like say things that are controversial, then there would be no more problems in society. It's like it like
That
what am
wasn't
I
at all
supposed
what
to
I
say to
was saying.
you? What am I supposed to say to you? Like, of course I support like Medicare for all, like actually having medicine and taking care of people that have disabilities. Um, I'm a Christian, so of course I believe that there is a right to life and that every life is special and should be preserved. So it's like because I said the R word, I am not an ableist, right? Because I say retard, that does not make me ableist. And if you have people that like actual people with disabilities that are dying on that hill, like I've never seen that. It's always people like you who are like just kind of like trying to get this perverse enjoyment from like this pride guilt that like you got me.
Also,
Like
I
you
would
got
like to
me.
bring up how has been on multiple live streams saying that we should find a cure for autism.
I agree, yeah. We should find a cure for autism. Autism is a
Okay,
big
so you
problem.
are an ableist then. because autism is not a disease. It is literally just a development it's literally just developmental differences in other people. So,
I don't know, man. It's
which
hard
is
to explain like how autism has increased like tenfold in the last like 50 years. There might be some environmental causes here. Um, but do you have any actual critiques of the party? Like, can we get back on topic again?
um yeah, I think you're exalting all my critiques because you guys are kind of being ableist and you guys are also not inclusive to like all workers because you guys slam baristas. You allow cops in the party.
Baristas aren't workers.
Yes, they are. How?
I don't want
Okay,
to, I really
actually,
don't
hold
want to
on,
do
hold
this
on, hold on,
debate, but here, let me walk you through this, all right?
hold on. How are baristas not workers? They do work. Okay.
But okay, I'm certain actually that Elon Musk does more work than your average barista. Like he probably works 60 hours a week. Is he a worker?
Okay, so you're bringing up Elon Musk, but Elon Musk is we know he's bourgeois. He owns. He doesn't do work. He does is sit on his ass and own companies like Twitter,
No,
like
no, there's plenty of business owners that do a lot of work. So the
okay, like who?
definition of
Like who?
proletarian that is premised solely on working, working, even working for a wage, right? Most CEOs receive a wage from the like general board of the company, right? So this is just a bad definition of what a worker is, right? We have to be a lot more precise than these very like vulgar, like kind of retarded position. Oh, sorry, excuse me. Uh these very respected positions that like being proletarian equals wage or equals work. That's not what we're really speaking of. Like there is a specific question
Okay,
of who is working class that surrounds the production of
but
surplus value, right?
hold on, hold on. So you're saying that CEOs do more work than baristas do?
Yeah, I would say
So, but hold
actually
on, no, no, no.
if I could ban every single barista from the party and have every CEO join the party, I would do that.
But why? Because the CEOs, all they do, because CEOs own the companies. They own everything. So by definition, they're bourgeois because they're a ruling class. They own the means of production. They don't do the work. They don't contribute to the
They
means of
don't own
production.
the means of production. The
Yes, they
CEO in a
do.
public company
Yes,
is
they do.
they're an employee of the board actually, and it's publicly owned. Um, Sometimes there's a CEO who also controls the majority share of the corporation. But you know, most CEOs actually are just employees of the board, right, of a public company. So I'm not saying that CEOs are workers, right? But I'm saying that your definition of what is like bourgeois and proletarian needs to be a lot more precise, right? We actually have to evaluate what kind of labor produces surplus value. Does making coffee produce surplus value? No. It just is taking already produced surplus value in the form of the commodities of coffee and milk and sugar and whatever have you, and is combining them together, right? And the reason this is important, the reason that this this debate, which frankly I grow tired of, but the reason that this whole debate is important is because the thesis of the ACP, in line with Marxism, is that the capitalist mode of production is being outmoded, right? I would like to point you to a quote from Marx, right? So because you read a long one, I'll read a relatively long one here. So they say in the manifesto, and here it becomes evident that the bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to be the ruling class in society and to impose its conditions of existence upon society as an overriding law. It is unfit to rule because it is incompetent to assure an existence to its slave within his slavery. because it cannot help letting him sink into such a state that it has to feed him instead of being fed by him. Society can no longer live under this bourgeoisie. In other words, its existence is no longer compatible with society. So when we're
Hold on,
saying
let me
that there's
pressure.
all of this, hold on, service labor in the economy is precisely what Marx is saying, which is that instead of the workers feeding the bourgeoisie have been outmoded by the actual means of production. We have a fourth industrial revolution going on. We could integrate so much more robotics and AI and information technology to get rid of so much useless, unproductive labor. But because the bourgeoisie
That's not
wants
what
to
he's
retain their
saying.
surplus value, they have to create these new bullshit jobs, right? These new service, unproductive labor to dole out a little bit of the surplus to the people to keep a roof over their head so that they don't revolt against the control of the bourgeoisie, right? These are entirely use. It's like we don't need baristas. We don't. Hey, look, I'm a dishwasher at a breakfast cafe. Like, we don't really need restaurants. We don't need all of these
Mm.
this useless service labor going on, right? We should be instead giving people more free time. We should be reducing the hours in the work week down to 5, 10, 15 instead of 40. The 40 number is arbitrary and shows that the bourgeois class has been outmoded because they want to retain control over private property, and thus they have to keep the people working on the property in order to keep them fed. The bourgeoisie is instead feeding the working class. They have nothing left to offer us, so they're doing all of this social democracy and all of this handouts and creating these useless service jobs to keep a control on a economic reality that is rapidly slipping out of their grasp.
That's literally not at all what Marx meant. What Marx was saying is that the bourgeois will do anything to exploit the workers and make sure that they, and again, sockdems, they, and yeah, but it's not the jobs that they're creating. It is the very it is AI that they're actually, with the new technologies, they're going to actually find a way to cut out those people so that way they can just say you're useless to us. Because
Yeah,
that's the
I
way the
mean,
bourgeois sees the
we're the
workers. They
essential
see
labor.
workers
Okay,
as useless. That's why we must go up and revolt. And here's the thing. I also want to bring up cops. Why do you guys allow cops in the party?
frankly,
What's the stance on cops?
I'm not very aware of that situation. And personally, and this is speaking from my personal judgment, um I don't know what the party has actually said about this whole controversy. I do not think the police should be in the party. Um, but I'll warrant that there's a lot of misunderstanding around the case because there's always a lot of misunderstanding around the case. But because I am not specifically prepared to address that specific controversy, right? I don't feel necessarily comfortable elaborating more than that. Um, so I can't really answer for that. But generally speaking, like it's not like our party is pro cop. Like we have spoken many times against the police. One of our chapters actually worked in a fundraiser with the police, and they were chastised for that and had to do a self criticism. So we're very much so not pro cop, right? That's not what we're doing. Um, uh, but I do want to like continue going down this line. Of course, like the whole reason that the rate of profit falls is because the bourgeoisie like are automating these crucial sectors to compete with each other, right? But then the people whose jobs get automated have to work elsewhere, right? Because they are still like a labor commodity that has to have a roof put over its head and be fed, or else there will be problems in society, right? So this massive expansion of the quote unquote information quote unquote service sector is the solution where all of these people who would originally be working in these productive jobs that are now automated or outsourced and sent overseas, they are put into these different jobs in order to keep society running, in order to keep reproducing the labor commodity, right? Because we can't just have half of society out on the street starving, even though there is a massive homelessness problem in this country. And those are all undoubtedly victims of the sort of decline of our actual productive economy. Um, but that's the reason for the expansion of this consumerist kind of service sector is because uh people still need to eat even when these other jobs are automated, right? There's this kind of contradiction and tension. The bourgeoisie in this case is literally holding back the entrance into the next industrial revolution, into a world of free time, right? Where we're able to automate and do away with all these jobs. Of course, there's automation going on, but then it is only being replaced where you now have to work 40 hours in this ridiculous service job, because there's still this question of private property, and there's still this question of having to work somewhere, do something in order to receive a wage, right? And so that's where all of this parasitic service stuff comes from. And it's not productive labor, it's just a complete inefficiency and redundancy in the economy to account for the fact that a lot of jobs are being automated and the productive, actual productive aspect of the economy is being outsourced.
Okay, I want to harken back to what a worker is. So here's the definition of a worker from Marx. Um, the worker does not own the means of production, which CEOs do, in fact, own the means of production. Examples given: factories, land, tools, capital. They sell their labor power to those who do, the bourgeoisie or capitalist class, in order to survive, produces surplus value, which is the value created by the worker that exceeds the wages they're paid. This is the surplus is appropriated by the capitalist as profit. So, by that definition, that doesn't there is no such thing as useless jobs when by that definition, even those jobs that are unimportant are still being offered to people who are considered proletarian. So, again, baristas, despite not being exactly important, they still need they're still proletarian because they don't own any capital, because they don't and have to sell their labor to the bourgeoisie to survive. They are still proletarian, and they also produce surplus value. So, by the Marxist definition, baristas and all other jobs that you claim aren't proletarian actually are. Meanwhile, CEOs, it's not really defined by how much you work. It's more more of like whether or not do you own capital? Do you have to sell your labor to the bourgeois? Do you produce surplus values? If all the answers to those questions are yes, then you are proletarian.
Can I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
Can you explain what happens to capital, right? Raw materials that makes it into surplus value, that makes it into a commodity that produces surplus value. Like, can you explain that process?
Oh, certainly. Surplus value is value which is created by the worker that exceeds the wages they are paid. This surplus is appropriated by the capitalist as profit. So, that is the definition of surplus value.
So
Think of
surplus
it.
value comes from commodities, right? Like let's start narrowing this down, right? So if I'm paid $20 to shine shoes and I make $100 in 1 hour, so I ultimately come away with $80 in profit, I have not created a surplus value, right? It was exchange
Well,
of
because the
money for
bourgeois
money.
takes it. They always take your surplus value.
Okay. So let's say I work for a shoe shining company, right? The same question remains like, is the surplus value merely the money that I do not get paid back by my boss, that my boss pockets and reinvests or turns into an investment elsewhere? Is that simply what surplus value is?
Again, surplus value would be like working overtime. Think of it like that. But a lot of the time, the bourgeois usually subtract that from your pay, like in case work more or work less. It it really depends.
Okay.
But it is value
We're
created
getting in the weeds
outside of
here.
your wage.
Let me read you something, and I just want to hear what you kind of think about it.
Oh, go ahead.
The difference between productive and unproductive labor is important as regards accumulation, since one of the conditions for the reconversion of surplus value into capital is that the exchange should be with productive labor alone. The capitalist, as representative of capital engaged in its valuation process, productive capital, performs a productive function, which consists precisely in directing and exploiting productive labor. The capitalist class, in contrast to the other consumers of surplus value who do not stand in a direct and active relation to its production, is the productive class par excellence. As yet, we are only acquainted with capital within the direct production process. The situation with other functions of capital and with the agents used by capital to perform these functions can be examined later. The productive, and therefore also its opposite, the unproductive character of labor depends on this, that the production of capital is the production of surplus value, and the labor employed by capital is labor that produces surplus value, right? So let's highlight some keywords here because we're narrowing it down. We're getting closer to what actually is being talked about here. The valorization process, where productive capital performs a productive function, right? What do you think productive capital is when Marx is saying that what is put into the process is productive capital and productive labor? What is productive capital?
Productive capital. Okay, so what do you mean by productive labor and productive capital? Does that mean like
I don't know. I
every
mean, you're the scientist of surplus value here. What
Okay,
is
well,
productive capital?
productive capital, I'm trying to get my words right.
It's okay. I mean, sometimes ChatGPT does have some good answers. He's really trying to get his words right.
Productive capital is probably is
Okay. It's
Yeah,
a
like you're getting
commodity
really
that is
pedantic.
used to produce other commodities, right?
Yes,
That's
that
productive
is what it
capital.
is.
Okay.
But
So that means that any labor that does not have productive capital, which is to say it does not purchase commodities for the production of other commodities, it cannot be productive labor, right? So any service that is not consuming something, that is not consuming a commodity to make a commodity, is not productive labor, right? There is a
which
meaningful
isn't
distinction.
that's not exactly true though.
Well, that's what
All
Marx said.
labor to an extent is productive.
That's not what Marx would argue. Marx was very clear that there is an unproductive labor sector that exists outside of this relationship of the bourgeois and the proletarian, right?
Yeah,
He
the
would consider most of these, I mean, literally, we're talking about from his
we're
own premises, right, that I just read to you. What productive capital is commodities that are consumed to make other commodities, right? Under these
yes.
terms, under these terms, not all labor can possibly be productive. Do you have a refutation of Marx here, or are you do you just not like
Look,
the idea that some labor is unproductive?
dude, like hold on. You're saying this what does this have to do with baristas? Why are you calling them unproductive? Because again, these things that these
Because the
commodities
actual
use
productive capital in the circuit
productive
of the
capital has
okay,
been
hold on, hold
used.
on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on. The actual productive moment in this circuit is all of the things that are bought to grow coffee beans, that are bought to produce milk, that are bought to produce all of these other elements that go into the drink. When the barista gives you a drink, that is not a commodity, right?
It
The
kind of
commodity,
is because
the
you're paying
commodity.
for the drink.
So a commodity is anything you pay for. Is that where
Yeah,
we're
that's
at?
kind of what it is.
Okay. You gotta read the first chapter of Capital Volume 1. And then we can do like another debate on this question later. So at this point it's just like you're so like don't know what you're talking about that it's almost like wasting our time. Um so do you have any more like contentions with the ACP? Um because this whole question of like the commodity and productive labor, like you're just out of your element clearly. So do you have any more stuff?
My issue with you guys is that is how you is how pedantic you guys get when in a
So
debate. It's like,
it's not pedantic to criticize one tweet and say that's representative of the party. That's like not a
well,
pedantic
it's
thing, which is what you've
concerning to
been
say
doing.
that it's concerning that one person's embracing manifest destiny and some others are saying that Trump's good, as well
Hold
as
on, hold on,
some
hold
big
on.
names saying that Pol Pot
Can I
didn't do
ask you a
anything
question?
wrong.
Just like don't don't take this the wrong way. Are you autistic?
What?
Okay.
What does this have to
Don't
do with the
don't no no no
what we're
no no no.
debating?
I no, it might actually have something to do here. Are you autistic, neurodivergent,
Why
Asperger's,
are you
whatever?
asking me about my autism? This has nothing to do with this.
Okay, so you do have autism. All right. Let me explain to
Why
you.
are you asking me about this? This has nothing to do with what we're debating.
No, no, it actually has become the decisive
Why?
element now because it's
Why has
clear
why?
that when you open up your laptop and you go on x.com, you are
Twitter.
reading tweets and you are thinking they are 100% serious, concrete propositions. You
Okay,
do not
joke or
see
not,
that
what
there
you
could
say
be an
is still
element
fucked up.
of irony. You do not see that this is like happening, and it's explained now. We all get it now. Like uh I mean, I'm not gonna hold it against you. Like, it's just why you don't understand that this manifest destiny thing is a joke is because like you're not able to close the loop a little bit. All right, you're struggling with what is and isn't serious and what is and isn't concrete. That's not concrete. It's okay. It's a joke. It doesn't matter. It's not a position of the party. Like we can move on from that. I don't know why we went. I guess now that we understand that you are autistic, it makes more sense, right? We can give some grace here. You have any more points? Kaido, Kaido the wolf. Are you still there?
Yeah, what is it?
We're still I mean, are you done or do you have anything else? Like, what's next?
I think the biggest question I have, and this has something to do with has, is how many holes do women have below the belt? Because he had a moment on
Million.
stream where he said that there were only two holes.
Is that okay? Is that like actually I have a question for you.
What?
Um, so when I look at your profile, right, you have Kaido and you have the
Right?
sun
Yeah, yeah,
and you
yeah.
have the hammer and sickle, blah blah blah, the
Yeah,
flag.
what are you what is where is this going?
Do you take yourself and your persona online to be like as a representative of a left wing position in this country? Like, do you think
Yes.
that your profile is like a perfectly adequate demonstration of what it means to
Yes.
be a communist?
Yes.
Can I ask, what does I don't know how to approach this, but what does digital furry porn have to do with communism in your words?
I don't produce porn. What are you talking about?
What does being a furry in general have to do with communism?
Why are you asking this? Because it has nothing to do with politics. It has more to do with a fact that I'm a part of a fandom, but why do you feel a necessity to make it part of politics? Also, the furry fandom has been kind of a leftist group. Has been more like
So
more normal and open to
so
leftists.
let's just do a quick hypothetical. You are trying to do what the ACP does. You're trying to organize these dry age truckers, and you pull up and you get out of your Subaru. I'm guessing you drive a Subaru, and you're wearing your fursuit. Uh, what happens next?
I don't have a fursuit, dude.
Okay, in all seriousness, what I'm trying to ask you is, do you see any use or purpose strategically and tactically in having a persona and a presentation online when you yourself claim that you're trying to represent a left-wing position in this country? Do you see any use in like not presenting like things that are obviously deemed like cringy and perverse and strange in normal sensible society, including among the working class? Like,
Why are you saying cringy and all
do you
that?
not see any problem here? Like, you don't see
I
any problem.
don't see any I'm asking you, what's the issue?
The issue, okay,
Is it
this
because I'm a
goes pointing
furry? Is it
this
because
goes
I'm a furry? Like, why I'm asking why do you give a shit that I'm a furry?
because
I'm
it is not something that you should represent communism with. Period. End of story.
Why? What's wrong with it? Genuinely.
Well, the fact that you're not like you're not. Are you at least aware that there's kind of like a stigma here? Like there's kind of like this
Yes,
is
and that I believe that should be broken. Who cares? Why do you care so much about
because
all?
it's not putting your best foot forward, right? My whole third point in my remark was that the ACP has been very conscious and strategic about its online presence, trying to build up the authority and the consciousness of communism in this
So by
country.
building up authority, do you mean sucking up to the bourgeoisie and saying that and saying all this?
So what? No,
Yeah,
we're
that's what you
building
do.
our
You don't allow these any
Kaito the
like
Wolf.
social
If it
deviants
wasn't for the
to the party.
ACP, you would. I mean, you get so many likes on these posts bitching about the ACP, right? So like it's clear that there is this major like sphere of the ACP around which people like you and others who are ankle biting and constantly complaining about the party, you're all orbiting around this, right? So you can't say that there's not a new authority that has been brought to the name of communism by having an actual party and an actual like sphere online that is specifically advancing this position. Like you can't say that nothing has changed from 2024 to today at all. Like you can't say that. That's what we mean by authority. And you can't build authority
But
for
also,
communism
why? Also, hold
by
on. I also feel the need to bring this up. Why?
well,
Why did Has push the idea of class collaboration on a stream he did one time? A fascist idea of class collaboration.
what are you specifically referring to?
He didn't do it explicitly, but there was one time he pushed the idea of class collaboration on a live stream.
So you can go look at our program and you can see what our positions are. We are a militant Marxist Leninist party that is preparing strategically for class war. That's the end of the story. I don't see this is the problem. And this goes back to what I was saying before is that you have had years. You've had years to even give 30 minutes of your time to reading anything we've put out, to considering our arguments. And instead, you come to me with something you heard retweeted from someone who retweeted it, from someone who retweeted it, from someone who's working right
Yeah, this
now in
sounds
the
like you're more
Federal
committed to a
Bureau of
cult of
Investigation.
personality than actually building a movement. This
No,
sounds like
you're
you're
more you are thinking in the logic of cult of personality by trying to say that the personalities in the party somehow represent the collective, right? You can't even point to me like you don't have a concrete quote of this thing that Haas said about class collaborationism. I'm saying quit like having this kind of fixation on the personalities and actually go to the collective party information. You can go look at our program and our constitution and you can appraise our party on those grounds, right? You're the one who you have this inverse cult of personality. You have this cult of I don't know, bitching and being mad, like hate watching, right? But you are not actually presenting any you have yet to present an actual critique of our party, its positions. You've critiqued a tweet, you've
yeah,
critiqued
because you
something
guys
Haas didn't even say. Like where are we? Like what are
because
we
all you
actually
guys do
doing?
is counter. Like every time I make say something, you guys are like, "Yeah, but we're right because of this. We're right because of that." You don't actually take any of your critiques into consideration.
It's because
You
you
all
have not
just
given a single critique so far. Like not one critique. Like none of these are actual concrete critiques of our party.
I don't know, I don't know, your whole bitching about me being a furry and you saying that you should conform more to society. I'm like, what the fuck, dude? You're being
That's
a literal child.
That's the
You
mass
are you
line.
are
That's the
sucking
mass
up
line. What I'm
to the
advocating
bourgeoisie.
for is a consciousness of the sensibilities of the masses, and the masses are not
Yes,
furries.
I'm not
They're not
opposed to that, but
interested
that
in your
shouldn't be
demisexuality.
rude.
They're not
This
interested in
shouldn't
your
hold
digital
on. No, no, no,
bully
no,
or
no, 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 no.
they're not interested in these things.
This should be everyone. Everyone. It doesn't exclude gay people. It doesn't even exclude what fandom they're in. It doesn't exclude race, sexuality, what have you. What it is everyone banding together to fight the bourgeoisie. We don't
Yeah, but all that extra
need
shit,
any of these
you being a
subdivisions
furry is
because what you're
irrelevant.
doing is you're serving,
You
which
wanna
is a
go to
concept brought about
FurryCon?
to divide us.
No one is putting it past you what you do in your bedroom, and if you wanna go to FurryCon,
I
but
don't,
this is not
dude.
a
No, no,
good
no. This isn't
representation
about
of the
what I
communist
do
posi
in the bedroom
Okay,
because
hold
I
on, hold
don't
on,
do
hold on.
that crap
I
in the
actually
bedroom.
have I can't believe I haven't asked this earlier. Are you part of a party? Are you in an organization or, like, even supportive of a specific organization?
What does this have to do? What does this have to do with what we're talking about?
Because it would make a lot more sense if you were in a part of a party or anything, and like you said, quote unquote fandom, like communism is just one of your fandoms that you're a part of. Like
It's not a
just
fandom to
kind
me.
of
It's a legit
genuflecting
political.
towards the quote unquote working class while you're basically just like kind of like a furry guy on Twitter talking nonsense. So like you're not a part of a party, you're not aligned with any party, you don't support any specific party in this country, just to be clear. I'm not saying you have to say which chapter or where you live, like, what
Yeah, I'm
organization
affiliated
are
with
you part of?
PSL. What of it?
So you're affiliated with PSL.
Yes.
What okay. See, so this actually can help us move forward a little bit. Because like I said at the beginning, I wanted to have a bit of a comparison of worldviews. I did not really expect that you would just have all of these kind of empty, hollow complaints. Why do you support the PSL? Like, what is specifically like, why the PSL?
Because they're actually competent in the way they present Marxism because they don't try to pander to conservatives. What they do is they try to actually make you unlearn all the discrimination, all that taught by the bourgeoisie to divide up the working class.
Do they make you unlearn, or do they just gatekeep so that it's exclusively kind of this like white progressive urban cosmopolitan party that does a bunch of protests and doesn't really actually speak to workers? Because that's
Oh,
my appraisal of the PSL.
well, I mean, yeah, they actually do make you unlearn because they actually host stuff and talk to the party. You guys, all you
So is
do
there
is
is there
you
do you
just
think
LARP on
that
Twitter. That's all
so
you guys do.
wait. So since you're somewhat familiar with the PSL, you don't have to disclose anything that your like chapter or whatever they're called has done specifically, but can you point to like a PSL action that has been done that has actually gone to the working class? Like just recently. For example, I mentioned that we have gone to the Port of New York, New Jersey to organize drayage truckers. There's organization efforts going on in the ports of Long Beach. Um, can you name like a major kind of PSL kind of organizing effort going on right now in the working class?
They had a lot.
What? Because it seems to me that the PSL just does a whole bunch of protests and book clubs, which is what you would expect from a party that's kind of mass phobic and is very kind of gatekeepy and tied to their sensibilities as white progressive cosmopolitan people. And of course, there's not just white people, but progressive, cosmopolitan, urban, middle class, like that. It seems like they kind of gatekeep against the actual like other part of the working class, which is not these urbanite kind of people. It's actual blue collar workers in the heartland of this country. To me, it seems like the PSL has the exact same attitude as, for example, Hillary Clinton when she says that the whole Midwest is a basket of deplorables, right? It's kind of a mass phobic position that doesn't really change workers' mind. It just kind of virtue signals and creates kind of like a clicky uh, subgroup of kind of, liberal vanity politics. Because I'll tell you, I have like looked, like I look at the PSL main page and I look at some of the larger sections of the PSL, and I can't really find like any activity at all. Like sometimes they'll come up with like, oh yeah, we did an International Workers' Day like protest. We did like a pride parade protest, like we did this, that, and the other protest. Like they certainly have like a number of people who go out and like walk down the street together. But what I'm kind of trying to figure out is like, what are is there? Can you like give me an example of the PSL actually like doing something with like the working class at all?
Okay,
In
so
their
you
side of
accuse the PSL of being a white progressive party, right? So what does that mean to you? What does white progressive mean to you?
it means that so roughly we would call the Party of Socialism and Labor kind of a radical liberal party, right? It
Okay, so you're
appeals to the
calling
sensibilities.
PSL a radlib party, right?
Yeah, yeah. It appeals to the sensibilities of kind of a progressive left wing kind of uh disaffected with the Democrats, kind of Bernie adjacent kind of
Okay,
sect that is not really, I mean, overwhelmingly they're not like, most of them are destined to become professionals, managers, kind of middle class type people. They're not really like a good representative like sample of like the working class, and they're mostly in urban environments, and it's just there's a serious disconnect between this population and their sensibilities and their worldviews, which mainly comes from like college education and identity, the kind of politics of
yeah,
identity
what do
and
you have against college
idealism.
education?
I don't have anything against college education necessarily, but it's a fact that the academy is full of bourgeois idealist kind of conceptions of politics. I mean, you only have to look so far as like the whole new left, right? So at the 1960s and 70s, there's kind of a turn in the left, towards kind of basically conceding the class struggle in general and moving towards kind of a more like uh, it's more kind of a self-referential thing of like trying to receive, recognition, and like you said, kind of this inclusivity and this idea that like, not to say inclusivity is bad in and of
Okay,
itself, but what we're saying is it's no longer concretely rooted in a materialist analysis of the working class, right? It is rooted in kind of the idealist like kind of drive for self-liberation, right? It's more psychological. They're more concerned with, for example, Foucault and Butler are talking a lot about kind of biopolitics or the liberation of the self from any biological impositions placed upon it by the state. It's it's um it's it it just does not have like an actual Marxist position anymore. And that's what you get in
okay,
the academy. Like there's so much of the kind of like new left education that is just it's just not it's not premised in class struggle. It's not premised in dialectical materialism. It's about kind of, you know, the 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 identity and the recognition, the actualization of the self, um all of these very like idealist kind of metaphysical ideas of what it means to be emancipated, right?
Okay, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by like the whole liberate yourself from the but it's like
Calling, like, for example, intersectionality versus class struggle, like what are the differences here between these two different outlooks, right?
because
So for Marxist humanism, right, which is the humanism and the struggle for liberation that is rooted in Marxist analysis of society and in dialectical materialism, it is the working class that has a universal sort of identity, right, such that it represents the interests of all of society, right? It is the class that produces, right, that has this kind of essential role in building, producing, and reproducing society that has this kind of universal determination over the totality, right? That is what Marxism is talking about. That is why the proletarian class is the decisive and revolutionary class, right? Revolutionary as in revolves, right? The rest of society revolves around the producers, the working class, right? So that's where Marx is coming from. Intersectionality is more like you have this normative society, right? This is kind of what Judith Butler will talk about, what Foucault will talk about, that society in general, the majoritarian position in society is all of these norms and presuppositions and sensibilities that are antagonistic to the fringes, right? So it's this critique of normativity, right? And intersectionality calls for the fringes to unite together kind of against the majority or in the critique of the majority kind of normative position, right? And this is where you get kind of the counterculture, and this is where you get a lot of the performative kind of trying to push boundaries, the glorification of all of this stuff that goes on in the left. It comes from a sense that is much more rooted in like an intersectional kind of critique of biopolitics and like normativity than it is actually in a class struggle among workers, right? Because for the most part, workers don't have the free time to consider their self-expression and trying to do this counterculture thing. And in many cases, workers don't really want to be against the culture. They just don't want to get fucked over, right? So it's kind of these two different spheres and two different questions, right? And my appraisal of PSL and the new left in general is that it's gone a lot more in this kind of intersectional direction, um, which is not, it's not materialist. It's not rooted in like an actual analysis of the concrete reality. It's a lot more about kind of attaining towards this ideal of self emancipation via recognition, via prophilicity, being via having your identity be like recognized in the eyes of the other, right? Which is not Marxism. It's completely irrelevant.
yeah, but it's like here's the thing. Minorities shouldn't be hated on. I think this should be a common position even among Marxists.
I agree. I I certainly agree. No one hates minorities, but taking like a minority position or the question of, because do you see what the new left kind of does? It kind of concedes the fact that there is any potential for revolution. So really what we're considering is how do we make civil society more like kind and more inclusive to other people, right? Which is like, of course it would be ideal if civil society was kind and inclusive and there wasn't like bigotry, right? But then these are just ideals, right? This is enunciating an ideal that cannot actually realistically be fulfilled without the revolution of the working class, right? Like we
Yeah,
cannot
no
conceive
one's
of
saying it
any of
won't
this
be.
like positive recognition. We can't conceive of any of this before we actually deal with the question of the day, which is the private property question, which is the question of the bourgeois class and their being
Yeah,
outrooted.
because they own all the private property. CEOs own the private property. They own the means of
I
production. We must take the means of production from them and
Okay, yeah, 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 yeah. I think you missed the point of what I was trying to say earlier, but I really do not want to go back to that because you're out of your element there. But in any case, the working class as a universal force in the real movement of history is the question for Marxism. It's not about the self recognition of gender and sexuality and this and that and the other. It's not about those things, right? It just isn't. It's not about like this whole woke thing. Like that's not Marxism. It can't be Marxism because it's not rooted in the material analysis of society. It's rooted in psychology and normative kind of like ideals in society. And maybe those are interesting questions, and I'm not going to be against the academics that are interested in those questions, but that is not the question for Marxism, right? The question for Marxism is not the struggle for LGBTQ. It's not the struggle for this, that, and the other expression and kind of fringe position. It's the struggle of the working class, right? And in the case of the American context, I would add the concrete real material reality of the black working class and their experience of slavery as well as the indigenous, right? So that's the working class. Those are like actual concrete identities of rooted in material like history, right? That should be struggling, right? It's not about any other fringe question. And so that's why I kind of roll my eyes when you're like presenting communism as like furry communism or trans communism or gay communism. It's not about any of those things. Like we can say we don't want to like be openly bigoted against those people, like they can have their own individual choices, but that's not communism. That's not the spirit of communism theoretically or aesthetically. It's about the working class as a whole, not any one individual and their proclivities and identity, right? Righto. Where are you? Righto. Where'd you run off to? Righto, if you don't speak, I'm gonna bring some other people up shortly. So if you have any more important points that you want to get to or anything, you kind of went silent.
because I had to leave to go take a piss. What was the conversation about?
Well, I'm not going to repeat everything I just said. So, do you have any other
Bro,
points?
I had to take a piss.
Okay. And like, I guess you should have told us that you were going to not be at your phone because I'm not going to repeat all that. So, do
Bro,
you have any other opinions? or positions, criticisms? Because we haven't heard one yet.
Uh, God, I'm getting tired, so I feel like I've exhausted. I said what I've needed to say, so
So at the end of the day, are the ACP cowards?
yes, and I'll still stand by that.
What is this?
I mean, the fact that you guys
Yeah,
got mad at a tweet, you guys got so
yeah.
now you wanted to debate me when I set up a debate and you guys didn't show up. I wonder
Well,
what that was
we're all
about.
here. We're all here. Here, let me
I know you're
let
all
me
here,
bring
but
up some
that was
more.
all in response to a tweet I
let,
made.
let me bring up some more people. We're here. Like
Yeah.
you like are like of all of the things to characterize like the ACP people as like cowards is not like doesn't make sense. We're always
Oh,
coming forward and we're always willing to debate the points, right? Like you can find any 300, 400, 500 like follower like gorilla guy who will debate you like me right now. And we also have confront the chairman every week where you can literally you don't have to just talk to like some random guy. You can literally talk to fucking Haas, right? So
yeah.
appraising our party as cowardly when this is happening right now, we have heard every grievance that you have been able to come up with, and we have answered all of them. We give ample opportunity to answer them. We debate on Twitter all of the time. Like, how can you truly say that we're this cowardly group? Like, if anything, the pan leftists are more cowardly because they will insult, they will malign, they will slander, but they will rarely actually air like their concrete like positions and actually discuss them. So I don't see how you can call the ACP cowardly. But in any case, if you're tired, um, that's that's fine. If anyone else wants to speak, they can accept. We got Dale. Um,
All right. So mind if I go?
yeah, go ahead and go.
Hey, Red, how you doing?
Well, I'm a little bit disappointed because this is the second time where I have accepted a debate. I've written out like an opening statement and I've prepared to present an I wouldn't say the best case. Like obviously like we all have our shortcomings and we all make mistakes in debates, but I prepare a pretty good fucking case. And then just some random like slop tard furry guy shows up and he doesn't really know what our party is. He doesn't really know like anything. He has a couple tweets he's mad about. And then he just makes it all about himself and how offended he is by this, that, and the other, not really engaging or really offering anything at all. Um, which is unfortunate because we went for an hour and 40 minutes and I didn't really hear an argument, to be honest.
Mm, I feel you there. I've seen that happen a few times. Though, funnily enough, even with people who get like that one misconception that we're like pro MAGA or something, funnily enough, oh, I've had experiences at least recently where people are more than willing to, where people who are willing to listen actually kind of get the idea that we're going with.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that if anyone reads like what is on the infrared substack and considers it carefully, right? Like when I heard this furry guy reading, like I could tell he kind of has, I don't know if it's dyslexia or if he just kind of has low reading comprehension, but it was very slow and he didn't really understand what he was citing. Um so it's clear that some people just are not very intelligent, right? But if any like normal person gives like an hour and a half to reading some of the stuff we put out, like it's not like this crazy contrived like wild eclectic theory of Marxism. Like it's very sensible and straightforward in most regards, right? Of course, there is like some interesting and more unique elements to Haas's theory, but like that is not the dogmatic theory of the party either. That is some contributions he has made to theory that have not been like adopted as an official like opinion. Like not even MAGA communism itself has been adopted as like an official opinion. But even if you do read those things, they're not unreasonable, you know?
Hell, even for the long hell, I'm gonna come clean. I honestly didn't read the entire Substack until a bit later. I mainly got, at least from my initial understanding of it, I got a lot of it just by listening to Haas talk about it and just kind of seeing just the difference between, say, the movement and a lot of like the DNC left.
Yeah. Um yeah, I mean, like it's very I mean, you can talk about how like Dugan is brought in and how there's kind of this higher philosophical perspective going on. But for the most part, it is so obviously like communist. It's like I'm gonna be honest, like there is some more complicated aspects to Marxism, but it's relatively straightforward, right? And we are applying it in relatively straightforward terms. What is weird, what is an aberration, what is like a completely different thing is the sensibilities that come from the new left and this kind of like new pan leftist ideology. That is contrived. That is the thing that has departed from Marxism into this other thing that is unrecognizable. That is the thing that has departed. Our position is very classical, right? Going back to like our analysis of Marx and Engels, very classical, very straightforward. Our assimilation of the experience of the Bolshevik and Chinese revolutions, very simple, very straightforward. Like MAGA communism is literally just Mao's mass line. Like this is not even a new idea. Just because it's a slogan that's new does not mean it's actually a new idea concretely in what it's trying to communicate, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. I'll bring up
Oh,
I'll bring up my favorite trucker. My favorite trucker, Spanish Dominican King himself.
hey, Spanish.
Hey guys, what's up? How you doing?
What's up? Um I'm sorry that you wasted your time listening to me debate that kind of stupid furry.
No,
Um
it's all good. It's all good. That guy. The problem is with some communists, not all, but some, they have like this knee jerk reaction to like anything that is, how do I say? It's like if you don't put minorities on a pedestal and worship them, it's like, oh, you're racist. It's like, nah, man, just relax, take a chill pill. But that furry guy, is he part of the LGBT community?
Honestly, he's probably a little bit of everything. He's a little eccentric. I couldn't pick up. I didn't really look at his profile too much. Um, I don't know what he is, but he's definitely a furry. I can tell that much. And we did discover that he was autistic a little bit. So, which by the
Oh, I
way,
see. He sounds real young too.
yeah, I I don't really care what goes on in a bedroom, and I don't care if you want to go to FurryCon, right? Like, I'm not gonna be a neurotic Nazi and say that like these are just plainly evil things, and everyone who's like this should go to a camp or whatever. But if you think that that is what represents communism, and you claim that you're an account on X.com that wants to represent a left wing perspective, it's not being a furry, right? It's not being gay. Like that is not what is essentially Marxist. That's not what is essentially fighting for the working class. That's just your own individual proclivity, right? And so kind of smearing that on everything else and making everything else about your own subjective like experience is absolutely like I just shake my head at it because it's just selfish. it has no principle of actually being a disciplined like member of a collective movement towards a goal, right? It's more about, like I was saying, it's just like a social club where you get to express your own unique identity, which is not what communism is. Communism is the working class organized into a single unit. It's not about your unique special opinion, right? This is a movement. This is not a club or a safe space, right? For your beautiful soul.